adventure, motherfucker. For a lot of nerdy kids growing up, especially ones who are poor like me, choose your own adventure books were a great way of experiencing RPGs without having to pay for a console or buy a game.
While there were some more obscure, interesting ones, like the Nintendo-based books or the You Choose the Scare Goosebumps stories, the real first name when it came to these type of adventures was Fighting Fantasy by Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson.
And no, it's not the same Steve Jackson who made Munchkin or Zombie Dice. Though he did work for them for a bit.
The Fighting Fantasy books were great for letting you enjoy an old-school tabletop role-playing experience without the need for anything so strenuous as friends.
Woo! I had a sad childhood.
These books really did make you feel like you were an adventurer, travelling through different exotic locations and doing battle with dangerous monsters. I mean, hell, check out this advert that was on TV when I was a kid.
Confronted by fire-breathing Gorgons, you can look in your pack for something to offer them, turn to page 36, or turn to page 90, draw your sword and fight them.
In Fighting Fantasy game books, you are the hero.
Yeah, that fucking advert shows you how awesome these game books could be. Let's do it. Let's make some fucking Fighting Fantasy. Okay, so maybe watching someone play them isn't that interesting, but trust me, they're fun.
These game books were set in all sorts of different places. A deadly maze, a city full of thieves, a giant volcano, even outer space. Most of them used similar mechanics. You have a skill, stamina and luck stat, as well as an inventory filled with gold, provisions and equipment. You use your skill stat to fight monsters, as well as to get past obstacles. Use your stamina stat like a standard health point meter, although sometimes you need it to beat constitution related challenges like being poisoned. Finally, the weirdest stat is the luck stat. This can be used in various places to help you out of difficult situations, like dodging a rock slide, but can also be used voluntarily in combat to turn the odds in your favour. This stat is constantly going down as you play the game, because each time you test your luck, you have to reduce it by 1. There are several items in the game that can help you restore your luck, but it's still a precious resource. As well as the standard rules that most of the games use, there are several of the books that have special rules to go with the situations. Spaceship 1 has stats for your ship as well as several crew members who you can send into different perilous situations. The Armies of Death 1 has an entire army at your disposal, and the Sorcery books have an entire magic system which you can use to get your ass out of some dangerous corners.
Obviously there's more to it than what I'm talking about here. There are more games with weird mechanics, or games that lead into each other, but there's just too many to talk about. These games have been around since the 80s, so you can bet there's a lot of them. On top of that, it wasn't the only thing they did. They also did their own tabletop role-playing system, called Advanced Fighting Fantasy.
I have the first 2 books in the series, Dungeoneer and Black Sand. Dungeoneer covers the basic rules and details to adventures that you can send your players on, both to do with an evil wizard. Black Sand features some changes and expansions to the previous rules and another adventure, this time set in Port Black Sand, which was previously featured in several of the Choose Your Own Adventure stories. There are even parts of these adventures which tie into characters from the adventure books, meaning that you can actually play as your own character from a book you've already played through, which is pretty cool.
There's also a third book in this series called Alancia, but so far I've been unable to find a copy I could afford. They run into hundreds of pounds on eBay, and on top of that, the copies of these that I do have were damaged in a library fire, a lot like all of these Choose Your Own Adventure books. I in fact tried to repair some with different kinds of tape, including electrical tape for some reason.
Luckily, Advanced Fighting Fantasy actually received an updated edition back in 2011, so it is now possible to actually buy all 3 of these books in a single volume, along with their equivalent of a monster manual and a world setting guide.
Obviously this series has a lot of longevity. It's been basically in print non-stop since 1982, but thanks to the miracle of technology, we can experience these books in a whole new way. On the phone, while we take a massive poop.
As with many 80s nostalgic properties, you can now get them on your phone, and these games come in 2 distinct varieties. Firstly, there is Sorcery from 2013. This one is based solely off of the Sorcery series, which ran alongside the regular Fighting Fantasy books. These apps will have a one-off price, and each one contains the full story of one of the 4 Sorcery books.
These apps are a ton of fun to play, but it's kind of a shame that you have to have all 4 installed at the same time. And it would have been nicer if they could have had all 4 books just added to the one app as it got updated. You can move progress along from one book into the next, but it still sucks that I have to have all 4 apps installed if I want the whole series. I hate clutter.
Moving on, earlier this year, Tin Man Games released an updated app which includes several of the Fighting Fantasy gamebooks, with plans to release more down the line. This time around, there is only one app and you can simply pay to unlock more of the gamebooks, something which is a welcome change from the slightly more outdated 2013 app. Each of the different gamebooks that you can play through have several different options: a more modernised version with all the bells and whistles, a hardcore mode if you hate yourself, and a free read mode for those of us who used to cheat our filthy black hearts out.
I never cheated. I didn't cheat.
Okay, so I might have cheated a little bit, but the main reason that it's necessary is because these gamebooks are unforgiving as fuck. Almost every decision that you make in the game has the potential to lead you to a horrible and gruesome death. If you take a wrong turning, you get sacrificed to an evil cult. If you fail just one luck roll, you can fall to your death. Hell, at this point I'm not even sure that you don't need to cheat just to finish most of them. These games work pretty much exactly how they did in the book form, down to rolling your ability scores and dice for combat. The only bad point is the fact that there are only 8 books available right now, and if you've still got the books like me, there's not much of an advantage to this version.
Okay, so that's the answer if you want to drop a deuce while playing these games, without having to take a full set of dice into the bathroom with you. But trust me, it's not easy. But what if you want a more complete experience? Well, luckily, Modern Era's got you covered there too. To the computer! The same people who put out the app also put out a game a couple of years ago, based on the first book in the series, The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, and this is probably the best way to experience the game in a digital format.
Like a lot of people, Warlock of Firetop Mountain was the first fighting fantasy gamebook I ever played, partially because it was the first one, and partially because I got a copy of it free in a magazine when I was a kid. It tells the story of a mysterious mountain controlled by an evil wizard. You are tasked with putting an end to his evil reign by traversing the dangerous depths of his disastrous dungeon. The Steam game includes everything that you used to get in the original gamebook, but now with full colour graphics, a deeper combat system, and visuals reminiscent of playing an actual tabletop RPG. You also get to select from a group of several different playable characters, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. If, like me, you remember the original adventure well, you'll be pretty familiar with most of what happens in this game, although there are a few curveballs here and there, like this old fucking bastard here. Oh, half the time you're an old hermit who just wants to be rescued, but the other half of the time you're an angry old fuck who wants to try and murder me and eat my soft meats. Well, fuck you, you geriatric old cunt bucket.
I swear I'm fine.
Okay, so seething anger aside, the game is pretty fun for the most part. The only really annoying section comes right at the end, when you have to try and make it through this ridiculous maze before you take on the Warlock himself. Obviously, in the original gamebook, this segment never changed, so even if you died and had to start over, you could at least memorise where you had to go and get there in the end. In the new digital version, the entire thing is randomised every single time you die in it, so even though there's a checkpoint right at the start, you're going to have to get really lucky just to get through this shit.
As you can see, if you really love adventure stories, or you just want to relive some of those lonely childhood memories, the Modern Era has you well covered with the Fighting Fantasy series. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go and get consistently murdered by a pirate cult. Fucking pirates!
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like and share, because it really does help us out. And if you want more weekly updates of zany or nerdy content, then hit subscribe and click that bell.